to kind of pivot now, we're going to talk. This is kind of a funny subject. It's kind of weird because it kind of straddles like an orange nerd subject, but then it kind of straddles an OG 55 subject. But we're going to kind of go in a Parks direction with this, at least for now.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and share my screen real quick. All right. So it says here, Tom Holland, who we all love and adore, Mr. Tom Holland, says the cast treated Spider-Man No Way Home as a conclusion to the franchise. And then it kind of goes on to say here, Tom Holland and the cast of Spider-Man No Way Home are prepared for the film to be the last of the franchise.
Yeah.
It's in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, published Thursday, the 25-year-old actor said the film will likely be the conclusion to the Spider-Man Homecoming franchise, and actors treated it as such. So the interesting thing about this is that, like, Tom Holland, and I'll link it down below so you guys can read the whole article. But the interesting thing about this is that Tom Holland is basically saying, like, you know, his Spider-Man in the MCU is probably done. It's probably a done deal after this movie. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, well, what the hell does that have to do with the parks? Well, it has a lot to do with it because we just built a $1 million Spider-Man ride based around Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So that's a very interesting dynamic. Now, for those of you not aware at home, the Spider-Man situation is a weird one with Disney because they have to share these film rights with Sony. There was a deal made prior to Disney buying Marvel, so it's a legal kind of messy situation. But Dre, what are your thoughts? I mean, how do you think let's just say, you know, this pans out and this is the last movie that Tom Holland does for Spider-Man for the MCU. Is it going to affect the attraction, or do you think that the attraction is safe as it is?
Well, my insight, you know, my instinct was probably not. I mean, look, the reason I say that is because we all know that the Avengers camp. I mean, they're actively building a Spider-Man attraction now in Paris, so this is quite interesting. But you know, my instinct was that, you know, unless Disney does something with the attraction regarding a kind of renewed Spider-Man, and to Tom Holland's point here, he does kind of allude to that if they were going to go back to this, it would be kind of almost a rebooted Spider-Man, which does get the kind of you know, wheels percolating in the head. But we'll save that for an Orange Nerd discussion. Keep it on the parks for a minute. Unless they kind of go in that reboot direction and want to infuse that into the attraction, I mean, you know, maybe. But honestly, my instinct is, until that happens, until another Spider-Man really takes off, I don't really see the kind of Spider-Man attraction changing all that much. I mean, look at Iron Man for Hong Kong Disneyland, for example. Iron Man in the MCU is technically dead at this point, but his presence remains completely unaffected in the Hong Kong version of that attraction. And because there's no timeline that the MCU, or I'm sorry, Avengers Campus kind of revolves around, like there is with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. That's a whole different story. You know, you could have like a what is it? A Falcon Winter Soldier? A Falcon Captain America right next to Steve Rogers Captain America, and it's pretty awesome to see that, right? So, like I said before, unless a reboot really takes off and really is it does unbelievably successful and well, I don't really see much in the way of implication for the Spider-Man attraction.
Yeah, and I think this is actually partly why, in my opinion, and I'm just going into speculation land right now, but like I think that one of the reasons why, and a lot of fans were upset, like, why didn't we get a Tom Holland animatronic in the pre-show? You know, that would have been cool. Instead, we got a bunch of screens. I think the screens are actually kind of a forward-thinking kind of decision by Disney because they understand the legality and the legal drama issues they have with this character. And so by having a Tom Holland in screen form in the pre-show, you sort of make it easier for yourself if something happens down the road, where let's just say for whatever reason, legal wise, Sony says, you know what, Disney, you can't use the Tom Holland version for whatever reason. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
Things occur, things arise.
You really
Then
never know.
you can swap out that screen with a different version of Spider-Man or whatever very easily. If it was an animatronic that they, an elaborate animatronic, it's a little harder to de-skin it and change it, and it's a whole big thing. So I think that's part of the reason why a lot of this attraction is screen-based, because of the legal issues with Sony. It does give Disney the option to sort of swap in and out various things if they need to down the road. So that's a possibility too. There might even be a scenario down the road where, the MCU has one Spider-Man and the Sony Spider-Verse has their own Spider-Man. There's two separate Spider-Man. They are different universes, that might be a situation down the road. Again, who knows? I mean, we just don't know what's going to happen with these two companies, but the screen-based approach for Webslingers definitely gives them flexibility going forward, though. If anything comes up like that,
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of building in this kind of modularity or this kind of flexibility that you can change that. And when you brought this up in the pre-show, I was like, wow, that's actually a good point. I think you keyed in on something really, 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 really strong there, which is they have kind of set themselves up to be flexible when it comes to, this kind of variable situation that is the Sony deal. Do we know if Disney has secured rights from Sony, or if Sony even had the park rights for Spider-Man, and what those might look like?
That's an interesting. No, I don't know. And if you guys know at home, comment below. I'd love to hear from you. But
Please.
I don't know if that's, again, I'm like, legally, I don't know the loopholes here. Are the park rights different than necessarily the film rights?
And how does the Tom Holland version of Spider-Man interact with those theme park rights?
Right. Because I know Universal holds the theme park rights east of the Mississippi. But what's Sony's role in Anaheim in regards to Spider-Man? That's a very interesting point, Ray.
I think it is. And maybe that's kind of, to your point, maybe that's kind of why they said, let's not do a Spider-Man audio animatronic necessarily. Let's keep this thing flexible, because it is a fluid situation when it comes to this Sony IP here. So, it is quite interesting. And let's be honest here. We could speculate when it comes to the theme park attraction. Hey, what if Spider-Gwen takes off, for example? What if Miles Morales takes off, for example?
Right.
You'd want to have that kind of flexibility, for this attraction to integrate some of those characters or character, in this attraction. So, I think maybe Imagineering kind of. I kind of knew that going into it. Obviously, we know it's cheaper. We know it's just kind of value Imagineering, as we've heard the term thrown around. But in this particular sense, this might have actually served a real purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Because imagine if I don't know, for say Indiana Jones Adventure, right? Yeah. Let's say the circumstances were different. It might have made more sense to not have Indiana Jones be an animatronic, because if Disney felt like, okay, well, in 5 years or so, the rights for this might change, maybe we'll kind of have a screen at the end, instead, so we could swap out this indie with another indie if we have to, or whatever. There's certain attractions that And maybe in this case, they thought, okay, we're going to kind of nip it in the bud. Maybe we're going to kind of address this before that happens. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, though. It is.
Well, and these things change. These parks are not in a vacuum, and these actors certainly are in a vacuum. To kind of bring this back, it's going to be hard to bring up because these wounds are still fresh, so to speak, but. You had the Avengers Z-Ticket attraction that we've heard about, talked about, and so forth. And
Right.
To be honest, that had a very strong Wakanda component in it.
Right.
The whole idea was that you were going to be in a Quinjet visiting Wakanda, and you were going to notice that something goes horribly wrong, so to speak. The kind of the thing we've seen for attractions in the past. and you were going to be, put on that that area of Wakanda and fight alongside the Avengers. But as a result of all that, of the inclusion of that part of the MCU, T'Challa was supposed to have a strong presence.
Right.
Chadwick Boseman specifically was supposed to have a strong presence within that attraction, and now he's gone. And so, how that changes that attraction will be interesting to see going forward, and hopefully, as we said before, that attraction still goes off, right? Because Avengers Campus, I think, really needs it, and California Adventure really needs that attraction. But
yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point with T'Challa. I mean, like, things happen, and unfortunately, we lost him way too soon. And with these attractions, you have to make adjustments, and maybe Disney was kind of preparing for that when it came to Spider-Man, in terms of like the legal end of it, though,
Yeah.
And so,
and you just give yourself options down the road.
Exactly. You just give yourself that option down the road, and really in the Web Slingers, to the best of my knowledge, I believe that Tom Holland only appears in the pre-show.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like Spider-Man and the rest of it.
Right.
So if it ever comes an issue down the road where they can't use Tom, well, swap out the actor, or you just make him have the mask on the whole time or something, right?
Yeah, and for the attraction itself, or even for the show itself outside, swap out a costume, you swap out some animation, and now that attraction is updated. So we'll see, but this right here, this kind of update we have on the screen here, where No Way Home is kind of this conclusion to this specific, what is it, home franchise, is I think the Imagineers knew what they were getting into.
Yeah, definitely. And look, hey, like, if there's one person in the MCU that probably says too much and probably probably leaks a little more than he should, it's Tom Holland. I love you, Tom. I fucking love you, man. You're awesome. Yeah, that's one thing, dude. Like,
you gotta keep your mouth shut, man.
yeah, he does. He leaks a lot. He leaks a lot. And so what he's saying is it's probably pretty true.
Unfortunately, it probably is. He just can't help himself. You got to give him a non-answer when they ask you these questions, Tom. You can't feed the press, man.
Yeah,
they had no allegiances to you.
Yeah, it's hard, and he's a young guy. He's excited to be Spider-Man. I get all that, but yeah, he's had a few issues with that in the past, which is pretty funny. And honestly, Bob Iger has taken a liking to him quite a bit. I mean, Bob Iger has praised this kid a lot, and actually, I think it was Tom Holland's phone call to Bob Iger that got them to extend the Sony deal, from what I understand.
I have heard tale that his influence directly impacted that whole thing. So, and remember, we were all kind of wondering, like, ooh, because there was some, obviously this issue where the rights were going to be reverted back to Sony while this attraction was actually being constructed, and it was like, man, how is this going to impact the whole thing? It wasn't until later that we found out, no, Tom Holland is going to be a big part of this attraction, and that his character is coming back into the MCU. It's just this kind of whole fluid thing, but maybe development-wise, it was like, animatronic. Let's hold off. Let's have the stunt-tronic, yes, but maybe let's not commit to it in the actual attraction itself. So,
yeah, and like, I gotta circle back, Jen Psaki style. I gotta circle back. What you mentioned earlier with the movie rights and the theme park rights and all that legality and all that legalese. It's interesting, and I wonder how much of that comes into play here. Like, for example, Sony could have the film rights to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, but maybe they have no say in regards to Tom Holland's theme park presence, right? Maybe. Legal stuff like this is very weird, and there's a lot of loopholes and weirdness going on with that stuff. There could be two separate situations for the same character.
Yeah. I would like someone, if anybody knows, please comment in the chat or reach out to us directly on Twitter with any information regarding this, because this is a very fascinating thing, and I pretty much I kind of have a good grasp of the theme park rights as they relate to Walt Disney World and East of the Mississippi, as we detailed in the show before. But this one's kind of a legal gray area for me. So if anybody knows, please let us know.